Okay, we're going to get started. We're still having trouble with the line to the Yukon, so I'm not sure if they'll be able to join in or not, but we'll know more in a few minutes. So welcome, bonjour everyone, and thank you so much for coming here. I'm Kathy Wing, I'm the co-executive director of MediaSmarts, and I'm really pleased to welcome you here today for what promises to be a very lively and interesting discussion about marketing in the lives of young people. So what students need to know about marketing, and what marketers need to hear from young people. And this marks the unofficial launch of Media Literacy Week, which actually takes place next week. This is our 8th year of running Media Literacy Week with the Canadian Teachers Federation. And the reason we started this 8 years ago with the CTF was that both organizations strongly believe that to be a truly engaged citizen in the global world today, you need to have critical thinking skills about all the media that surrounds you on a daily basis. I'd like to thank the people and organizations who make Media Literacy Week possible. Yes, these are our partners today, Encounters with Canada and Vanier Catholic Secondary School in the Whitehorse, Yukon. This is the third time actually that we've done a launch with Historica Canada, their Encounters with Canada youth program. And this is a fantastic program that brings together youth from all across the country. And what we found is that the youth that come to this program are fantastic, they're engaged, and we love doing programs with you. So thank you so much for coming here today. So we have over 120 students from all across Canada, and hopefully some students from Yukon online later. This is Google Hangouts, first time that we've used it, and they seem to be having issues there. So, and it's very early there too. These students have gotten up really early to participate, so I hope it works out. I want to thank our sponsors for this year's week, who give us the critical funding that's necessary for all the events to take place across the country. This year our goal sponsors are YouTube, Bell, Yukon Teachers Association, and Yukon Education. Maya? We also have a silver sponsor is TELUS, and we have several teacher associations, as you can see on the screen, who are bronze and associate sponsors this year. So thank you to all our sponsors for their critical support, and we're really excited that we have so many teacher associations that support us every year, because it shows that teachers understand that these kind of skills are really important for their students. And finally, we wish to acknowledge the 70 organizations and countless individuals who are working to plan events all across the country for next week's Media Literacy Week. And they're going to take place in schools, community centers, libraries, National Film Board, there'll be film festivals, hands-on productions, and you can go to the website, medialiteracy.ca, and see sort of the breadth of the type of activities that are taking place. And I'm now really pleased to turn the podium over to Diane Woloschuk, who's the president of the Canadian Teachers Federation. And the CTF, as I said, has been a wonderful partner for 8 years now in this initiative, and we're really pleased for their support. Diane.
Bonjour et merci beaucoup, Kathy. On behalf of more than 200,000 teachers across Canada, I'm really pleased to be here with all of you this morning, invited guest speakers, and especially with the MediaSmarts team for the launch of the 8th Annual Media Literacy Week in Canada. Pendant près de 2 décennies, la Fédération canadienne des enseignantes et des enseignants a été une fière partenaire de Abilo Media, travaillant ensemble pour soutenir l'éducation aux médias dans les écoles. We are delighted that many of CTF's member organizations have signed up as sponsors and contributors from across the country. It reflects the importance that teachers and their organizations place on media literacy. Teachers want the best for you, their students. They want to give you the tools to read and understand the media, much in the same way that you learn to read, write, add, subtract, or play a sport. La capacité à penser de façon critique est un autre outil de la vie qui est très important dans un monde constamment en évolution. en termes de communication et de technologie. As we all know, there are ads everywhere we look, from billboards to big screens to the apps on our mobile devices. This is our environment, it's our reality, and it's going to continue to be our reality. That part's not going to change. However, what we can change is our knowledge and our understanding about media, and that means media literacy. L'éducation aux médias peut contribuer à ouvrir les yeux davantage aux messages dans les publicités qui nous entourent et à déterminer comment ceux-ci ont un impact sur nos perspectives et habitudes d'achat. Bien sûr, les annonces ont une influence très importante. One really good thing is that you're all extremely media savvy already when it comes to knowing how ads are produced and rolled out. Thanks to MediaSmarts' website, tools, lesson plans, and blog, educators and parents can play an active role in helping you to become more knowledgeable about media and messaging and their influence on you. We want to provide you with the tools you need to help you to make wise, healthy choices in your lives. So in closing, it's a delight for me to be here with you. I look forward to this morning's panel discussion and also to your questions and observations. And just as a teacher who's not in a classroom right now or in a school, I just want to say it's really good to be around young people again. I kind of miss you guys. So I'm glad that we're all here together this morning. Je termine en vous souhaitant une excellente avant-midi de discussion et de commentaires. Merci.
Okay, thank you very much, Diane, and we commend the Canadian Teachers Federation for their immense contributions to furthering media literacy in Canada. Now we're going to move on to the main event, and I'm going to turn things over to our moderator for today, Anna-Karina Tabernar. Anna-Karina is the host and contributing editor to Canada in Perspective, a weekly TV program that examines current affairs and their impact on people with different abilities. Her goal is to move issues from the margins to the mainstream. She recently traveled across Canada to coach and mentor aspiring journalists, all with vision, hearing, and developmental challenges. She has 20 years' experience as a journalist, spokesperson, and communication strategist. She anchored and produced the top-rated newscast in Eastern Ontario for CTV Ottawa and has reported on milestone events and current affairs for both CTV and CBC. Over to you, Anna-Karina.
Thank you, Cathy. Merci beaucoup et bienvenue à tout le monde. J'espère que la prochaine heure sera attrayant et éducatif parce que nous parlons de vous comme des consommateurs, une source d'information et un marché cible pour les entreprises. So today is really about you. We're talking about you as consumers, you as trendsetters, and a wealth of information. So what does that mean in terms of responsibilities and repercussions? We've got answers. We've assembled some of the top brains, some true insiders. We also want to hear from you, though, because I'm looking around the room. We've got a room full of super bright students. We want to hear your opinions. And if you have any questions, we've got a couple of mics set up at the back. And hopefully, if technology permits, we can pipe in our colleagues in the Yukon. We hope, fingers crossed. Oh, you're here. Hooray. Welcome. And good morning. So let me introduce our panelists. Our first expert is a journalist who covers advertising and marketing. She knows how different companies use different media to reach consumers like you. Globe and Mail readers are familiar with the byline and the work of Susan Krasinski. Thank you for being here. And right next to her, Ed Cartwright manages media and corporate communications for the Canadian Association of Marketers. He'll offer an insider's knowledge of the relationship between marketers and teens. Thank you, Ed. Now, that relationship almost always raises questions about privacy. Daphne Guerrero encourages people to talk and to think about digital privacy in her work as Manager of Public Education and Outreach at the Office of the Privacy Commissioner of Canada. Welcome, Daphne. And rounding out our panel is Sherry Graydon. She is an activist and an author and a proud grandmother. She also teaches about media literacy. Welcome to all of you. So let's get started here. First question. Let's throw it to Susan. Why young people? Why is it that companies are targeting young people, like people in our audience?
Okay, I'm just going to take this off. People are targeting young people not only because you are a valuable consumer segment, but also because you're incredibly influential. So marketing already has a buzzword for you. If you didn't know this before, you guys are millennials in the language of marketers. And what that signifies is a group of young people who influence the purchasing decisions, the style understanding, the technological understanding of everyone around you. Your behavior shapes the way your parents, your grandparents, your peers, your siblings, your friends all think about the world around them. That might sound excessive, but it's actually true. If you've ever had one of your parents ask you how to use their iPhone or demonstrated a lack of understanding of how to use their iPhone, you'll know what I'm talking about. And that's not being flippant. This is actually a real trend. So you guys are like walking, talking textbooks for the rest of the world in how the world is changing.
And I bet you didn't know that, right?
It's true.
Yeah.
The reason that's important is because not only are marketers looking to speak to you to ask you to buy things, to ask you to spend your money, but they're also looking to you for the way that you shape the point of view of everyone around you. And that influences a massive amount of consumer dollars. So think about not just fashion, but technology, music, the way that you consume media. And this is a point of particular interest for me as someone in the media. The way that you consume media is going to change in the next 5, 10, 15 years. The very fundament of how media works, how it's distributed. And so you have a real role to play in the way that these messages are disseminated and the way we understand them. And that's why marketers are concerned with you as a group.
Now, speaking of marketers, we have an insider, Ed Cartwright. What can you add to this?
There we go. Building really on what Susan said, one of the interesting points that I found was that teenagers, on average, and I actually find this a little bit over the top because I have 3 boys, but teenagers on average spend $4,000 a year on goods and services. And I think what Susan said, it's interesting when it addresses issues like not only apparel, but what you're seeing in the tech sector and with smartphones and things like that. Having said that, for marketers, and I know we're trying to sell products and services, and I'm looking at this from a corporate communications perspective, so understand that I'm not a marketer. It's about building a relationship. And we know that one of the big challenges, certainly for marketers, is that teens can trash products really quickly, and they move around from media to media extremely fast. And as a result of that, one of the challenges, a key challenge for marketers, is A, to be sincere, but also to be able to keep up with that pace of change. And they move around, as you know. I mean, you see it all the time. You're bright enough and you understand that when you see a brand on Facebook, you know that eventually they're going to try to sell you something. So the challenge for marketers is really in building that relationship, not only now because of the spending power that you have, be it that $4,000 a year, but looking out to the future because they in fact, or you in fact, I'm sorry, will probably be future consumers or potential consumers for those companies.
Now, in addition to that, I want to go over to Daphne. There is something very particular about the millennial group as well. The data, too, the data trail. And you have a lot of interesting insights in that regard.
Yeah, there is. I mean, Susan had talked about how you really are at this this textbook for advertisers that have so many insights to share with marketers on how the world works and what people want and don't want. And a big chunk of that is also because you guys are online, you're living your lives online, and because you're doing that, you're creating this trail of data. When you update your Facebook status, when you buy something online, when you download and use apps on your mobile devices, all of these little actions are almost like little cookie crumbs. And when you put all of those pieces together, you can create a picture, basically, an image of yourself. And that is what is very, very valuable to marketers. And that's where we as an organization see some issues and some challenges, because we understand that for businesses, this is important stuff. I mean, this is how they need to run a business. They need this data in order to inform their product lines and their business plans. But at the same time, we recognize, and we've heard from Canadians, particularly young Canadians, that they care deeply about their privacy. And so the challenge really lies in ensuring that not just young people like yourselves, but all Canadians understand what is happening to their data, so that when you use these services and these products online, you're going into it knowing that you're giving something up. You're giving up some data, some information about yourself in order to get something in return.
Thank you for that. Sherry, I want to bring you into this conversation. So we heard about the data trail and privacy concerns. We also heard from Ed about this relationship that marketers want to build with teenagers. How do you want teens to view this relationship?
With skepticism. You know, marketers rely on us as consumers to buy stuff, and that's sort of what makes the world go round in some estimations. But it is always useful to remember that their job is to sell us stuff and to earn money and to feed their bottom line, and our job is to make sure that the stuff that they sell us is ultimately in our best interests. So, you know, as was mentioned, you represent probably more like, kids spend $180 billion a year in North America. That's the direct spending that you spend. You influence the spending of adults to the tune of $700 billion a year, which is a whole whack of influence, as was already mentioned. And marketers' interest is in getting you to be interested in their products from a very young age, because they believe, and evidence bears this out, that if they engage you with their brand or their products at a very young age, you will be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars to them over the course of your lifetime. And so that can be a very good relationship, a mutually satisfying relationship if the products and services are ones that you need and want. But sometimes, let's face it, marketers try and sell us stuff that's either not in our best interests or that we don't really need. And so my job as a media educator is really to encourage you to always be questioning the claims that are being made by marketers and asking, is this credible? Is this in my best interests? What are they leaving out?
So we've heard already from all of our panelists that you are extremely influential in terms of dollars and the influence you have on other people who can buy. You're also trendsetters. We heard from Ed that you also have the power to trash a product. I'm curious, I want to open up the floor to you. Any products lately that didn't turn you on, that you didn't like, that you were able to trash among your friends? Can you go up to the mic, please? Identify yourself, tell us your name, and tell us where you're from, please. I think we've got a mic right over here. Or you know what? Here, I'm closer. Let me go over to you. Tell me your name. Tell me your name and where you're from, please.
I'm Blessing. I'm from Edmonton, Alberta. So one product was like the iOS 7 update, which I hate a lot. Hate it so much.
Are you sure about that?
Yeah.
Really?
Very sure. Yeah. It's like there's like some things that I like, but they like totally changed. Like, I like followed Apple for such a long time, and it looks so much different from what I've had for like 7 years now.
So you weren't satisfied with that. What did you do about it? How did you get the word out?
I kind of just told my friends, and they told other people, and just, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. So what kind of power does that show you? Susan, I'd like to hear your input.
There's a huge amount of power in that. Marketers are totally afraid of you. They're completely terrified of exactly that scenario that you describe. And the scenario you describe is actually slightly old-fashioned. So word of mouth has always existed, and it's something that marketers have always known is incredibly valuable, that if you can get people to tell their friends that they've had a good experience with your product, that has a lot of authenticity behind it and is in some ways a lot more powerful sometimes than paid advertising can be. Now, they're even more scared of you because you've got social media at your fingertips as well. So what you just described doing, telling your friends, they told other people, that's been magnified to the nth degree because maybe you went on Facebook and talked about how much you hated that. I'm suspecting you did, right? Yeah. Maybe you went on Twitter. I don't know. Yeah. So, and that is public. You've got, consumers as a whole have got a megaphone now. So all of the ways that marketers used to think that pleasing their customers was important and keeping people on their side was important has become even more crucial because every single one of you has the power to be your own messaging machine these days. You can get on Facebook, you can get on Twitter and use your influence to broadcast a message about either loving your experience with a marketer, and we've seen examples of people doing that. You know, when they have a really good experience, they'll share that too, and that's amazingly valuable. Or in your case, saying, I've been with these people for 7 years, I'm really disappointed. So you've got, as a generation, even more power than consumers have ever had before. And that's kind of an exciting thing, because marketers really want to keep you on side. They want to make sure that the messages that you now have the power to send to thousands, tens of thousands even, of people are the kinds of messages that they'd like to be shared.
So we heard about the power that you have to send your messages, your opinions out. Ed, I'm wondering from your perspective, what are the most common, most popular tools that marketers are using to reach this target audience?
Certainly the mobile channel right now is where they're playing more than they used to.
So do you mean smartphones?
Yeah, and because we know, as someone commented earlier, I mean, that's your lifeline in many cases. They're looking heavily at mobile apps, and I know that was as well mentioned. And there's as advice, I guess, for teens, it's important to understand that, well, we all know this, but nothing's free. And it comes back to a comment that Daphne made a moment ago about the exchange of data and where this data is going. And it's important to understand that, let's say it's a mobile app that you've signed up for. Know what you're getting into, and understand if you have to give any information, where that information might be going. One of the problems with smartphones is the transparency and the disclosure by the brand itself may not be in your face, and you may not see it. So I'd suggest that when you do go online, or if you do sign up for a mobile app, if you can't really get the information that you want from the app itself, or it's not showing on your smartphone, check out these guys on the website. Make sure that they have a privacy policy. Make sure that you understand how they're treating personal information. And you know what? I'll say this, even though you're teens, it doesn't hurt to ask your parents or guardian if, in fact, you're going to be downloading some of this stuff, because you just don't know where that information is going to end up.
Good advice. Now, Daphne, I'm wondering from your perspective, from the Office of the Privacy Commissioner, what kind of concerns do you have when it comes to mobile technology, smartphone use?
Well, we found that the mobile environment really presents some new challenges in terms of protecting individuals' privacy, and there are two reasons for this. One is that it's a very, very complicated ecosystem. say you take your iPhone, not to pick on Apple, but I'm assuming most of you have iPhones. Say you download an app, Angry Birds or something, onto your iPhone. That app is maybe collecting information about you, and you're not necessarily sure what that information is being used for or where it's even going, because there are a number of different players involved in that transaction. There's the app developers, so those are the guys that are actually building these cool new games and services and selling them on the App Store. There's the app platform, so that would be, in this case, the Apple Store, maybe the Android Store, the BlackBerry Store. There could be marketers or advertisers that app is using in order to help fund the development of that app. So there may be apps, or rather advertising within the actual app itself. And those are just 3 players. I mean, there may be other middlemen, other companies, other organizations in that ecosystem that are all using and collecting your data from your smartphone. So that's one challenge that we see. The other challenge is that we see occasionally apps that are collecting information that may not necessarily be actually necessary to use that app. So, for example, you may have a game that you've downloaded to your phone, but for whatever reason, that game also, in order to play the game, may want access to your address book. So these are questions that we're posing to companies and developers, and we've developed guidance for mobile app developers. But for individuals, for you guys, you need to be aware of this so that you can, as Ed mentioned, ask questions, be informed, provide informed consent. So the next time you download an app, do read the privacy policy, and if it's not there, if it doesn't appear in the app itself, look on the website. If it's not on the website, email them, call them, see if you can find out more about what kind of information you're being asked to give up and why these organizations may want this information from you.
So I've got a question for all of you. How often do you figure you receive ads on your smartphones? And how do you tell? I heard a voice. Can I get you in the second row in the red? Just over to the mic. Let's have a little conversation. Yeah. So I heard every single day. Is that about right for all of you? You figure every day? Now, tell me your name and where you're from, please. Hold on one sec.
Okay, my name is Juliana, and I am from Alberta, Edmonton.
So what do you figure is your rate of intake for advertising on your smartphone?
Well, I see it every day, like all the time. It shows up. Sometimes it freezes my phone, and like other times it just kind of restricts me from doing other activities on my phone, like messaging.
So how do you deal with all these ads?
I try my best to avoid them and close them whenever they pop up, but sometimes you can't really avoid it, and sometimes you accidentally click it and then it freezes. So yeah, I do my best, and sometimes I have to like undownload, like turn off and like get rid of an app in order to get rid of the advertising, but sometimes it doesn't work.
Kind of annoying for you?
Yeah, very. I have an Android, but it's not like a new Android, it's one
All
of
right.
the old ones.
Thank you for sharing that, and welcome to the nation's capital from Edmonton.
Thank you.
The Yukon, can you hear us? Wondering if there's anything that you would like to share, your experiences. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Morning.
So curious about your experience with advertising on your mobile devices. How can you tell that you're receiving advertising?
You want to go ahead, Jen?
Well, whenever there's a free app, it usually seems like in order to have that app be free on the App Store, they're going to have a certain amount of advertising, and it's usually there 100% of the time that you're using the app. So it doesn't necessarily pop up or anything, but you're going to get it on the bottom or the top of the screen. So it's really annoying, but it's also constantly there, so you could be subconsciously picking it up while you're playing a game or whatever.
I had a hard time understanding that. I'm sorry. It was a bit muffled for me. Oh, free apps. Okay. Thank you for that. I wanted to bring Sherry into the conversation. Did I miss something? I'll tune back in with you, okay? I wanted to bring Sherry into the conversation. It seems from this audience here, it seems that they know what's coming at them. Is there something else that they should be aware of, something that maybe isn't so apparent, so obvious?
Well, the comment that I was going to add is not really so much a response to your question as it is a reminder about what has already been articulated, and that is that marketers fear kids, and you have youth, you have the capacity to, in the book I talk about the 3 kinds of power that you have. You have consumer power. You can choose not to download the free app because you know it's going to come with more advertising. So you can choose what you buy, what movies you go to. You can, secondly, you have complaint power. You can contact the advertiser directly and say, you know, look, I like your app, but your free ads or your ads keep freezing my phone, and that's a drag, and I'm going to tell all my friends. And that's the third power that has been explicitly referred to, and that's your companion power, your ability to spread the word about something that you don't like. And so what I would suggest with regards to the privacy settings and the information about what you're signing away when you agree to something is if you discover that that what they're going to do with your information is not something that makes you comfortable, you should tweet or Facebook or let other people know, because Facebook, in fact, had an experience a year or 2 ago where they were forced by consumers like you to change their MO, to change how they were operating on Facebook and what the privacy settings were and how they were requiring people to engage with them. Consumers like you ended up forcing them to change their practice. So you have all this power. It's been reiterated. Feel free to use it in a way that serves your interests.
Let's switch gears a little bit. About content. Sex and celebrity. Miley Cyrus? Sherry, what's your observation on how those elements, sex and celebrity, are being used by marketers?
Well, they're very powerful tools, aren't they? Because we all get hooked. If we're sitting at our computers or we're surfing the net on our phones or our iPads, we get hooked, even if we're on a serious news site, by Miley Cyrus twerking or whatever it is. I admit to getting hooked myself. So they're very powerful components, and the challenge becomes that the images that we see most often of women in particular, but also increasingly men, are stereotyped in advertising and in marketing. And the stereotypes of men and women are often really narrow in terms of how they define what's desirable or what's attractive. And so as young people, when you're looking at who gets on the front page or at the top of the hour of the entertainment show, and you're realizing that they sort of look like they all look the same, they all have these perfect unattainable bodies, and in fact their bodies in marketing in particular are usually unattainable, physically unattainable. Not even Angelina Jolie or Miley Cyrus look like they look in the media because they have been graphically enhanced and photoshopped and twerked themselves by graphic artists. And so when we're comparing ourselves to those images, it's really predictable that we would start to feel lousy about the way that we look. And research makes it really clear that the more time, for example, women spend immersed in fashion media, the more likely we are to feel insecure about our own appearance and believe that we're in need of a makeover because we can't help but unconsciously compare ourselves with these images of perfection that don't actually exist. So that's among the challenges.
So you said a lot of interesting things, and I noticed some heads were nodding about how these perfect images are supposed to make us feel. I'm wondering if any of you, young men and women, can relate to what Sherry was saying when you see these very, very sexy images in some of the marketing messages that you receive. Yes, step over to the mic, please. And if you can just tell us your name and where you're from. We'd love to hear from you.
Hi, my name's Julie, and I'm from Winnipeg, Manitoba. And I just found it really interesting how you guys said that advertisers fear kids, but I think that they also feed off of kids' fear that they're not good enough. And I was just wondering if you guys have any tips on how we can avoid that and how we can kind of fight against that.
So just to reiterate that, your observation is that marketers feed off children's fears that you're not good enough, the inadequacy.
Yeah, insecurities.
Very interesting point. Susan, what are you seeing in terms of trends?
Yeah, it's upsetting how many heads I just saw nodding at that point. That's tricky. I think understanding what's behind that is crucial. So understanding that there's a basic messaging at play in all advertising, and that is you haven't got something and we want to make you want it. Whether it's a thing, whether it's a lifestyle, whether it's a body or a standard of beauty, there is a kind of a tacit message in all advertising, no matter how positive or negative the messaging might be, that they're trying to make you want whatever it is that they've got. And that's not always evil. I do want to stress that not all advertisers are out to get you necessarily. Some of them are trying to do this responsibly, but there is a sense in all advertising that's quite problematic, which is that it doesn't exist without making you feel like you're lacking something. And so a basic understanding of that, I think, is really, really crucial. A basic understanding of the ways that beauty is manipulated, especially in a lot of beauty and fashion marketing, is also incredibly crucial. So Dove has done a lot of work with that recently, certainly with their own ulterior motives, because they also want to sell you their beauty products. But they have been doing a lot of work in recent years to try to do beauty advertising in a way that they see as responsible. And they had a campaign just earlier this year on Facebook that was encouraging people to tweet out their own ads, or sorry, not tweet, but Facebook message out their own ads about no retouching or beauty standards that were more healthy. So I think just that basic understanding that none of the things that you're seeing in advertising exist without manipulation is really, really important. And take a look at YouTube, take a look at some of the videos out there that Dove and others have done on how people look before and after a photo shoot and just how much retouching can change someone's face, someone's body. Those are good things to watch from time to time, I think, to remind yourselves of exactly what goes on in that process, and to keep in mind that you're the ones who are in control, that the messaging doesn't have to control you. And if you approach it with the right amount of understanding, the right amount of literacy, then you can take in that advertising messaging, understand what it's trying to do, and make your own choices.
What you said reminded me a lot of the TV industry. Good lighting and a good stylist can make anybody look like a movie star. Yes. We have another question on the floor. Your name and where you're from, please.
I'm Andrew. I'm from BC. And I didn't have a question so much as a comment, because you mentioned the Dove campaign. I just wanted to say, because the company called Unilever, or I think that's what it's called, that does the Dove campaign, the guy who does it, they actually have the Axe campaign as well.
Yeah. Well, they own Axe.
In the Axe campaign, it's interesting because they sexualize men in a different kind of way. Like, they show, on one side of the floor, they're showing how women should all appreciate beauty, but then they're going over. And then on the other side, they're doing a different kind of thing to men and showing how men should be. So they're kind of being hypocrites in that sense.
Absolutely. And this is a point that's been brought up a lot more often recently, and that Dove campaign has been criticized for exactly that reason. And the reason that maybe you know that, where people might not have known that before, is because there's a lot more discussion about advertising out there these days. So I think it's great that you point that out. Absolutely. Axe doesn't only sexualize men, by the way. It also sexualizes women in a super problematic way, because women are basically these mindless bots who are rendered helpless by the scent of Axe, which I can tell you in real life, almost no women are rendered helpless by the scent of Axe, just for the record.
Well,
but But yes, I think that's an absolutely important point, and I think it's a really encouraging one because part of the discussion around, and I'll stop in a second and let you guys talk because I'm seeing a lineup, which is awesome. But part of the reason that maybe you know that is because the discussion is louder. It's exactly what we were talking about before. You may have seen that on Twitter. You may have seen that on Facebook.
Actually, there was a guy who came for a marketing talk at our
Oh,
school.
good, great.
Yeah,
so you saw it at a talk. That's even
Yeah.
better. But I think the fact that people are talking and are approaching things more critically, I think that's a symptom of a really connected age that we live in right now, and that's absolutely encouraging. It's a great point.
Andrew, thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Next, please, your name and tell us where you're from.
My name is Andrew and I'm from BC. Yeah, just at the start of the conversation, the four panelists mentioned how youth are pretty much the ones that go out and purchase stuff, and it is we that control the marketers. But I just want to bring this notion that technically speaking, we're still under the custody of our parents, which means don't the parents sort of have a sense control what we are doing and or have an influence? Because coming from an Asian background, my parents controlled me a lot in very different aspects. So in a sense, I just want to bring that topic out, thinking there's a lot of times where my parents would tell me not to buy this or not to buy that. So doesn't that come in play, or is it strictly just you?
Can I ask the other Asian mom to weigh in first?
As you were asking that question, I'm the mother of two young kids, and I've taken them to the grocery store occasionally with me, and they're relentless. Like, they'll see something they want, whether it's bear paws or fruit roll-ups, and they'll just be like, bear paw, bear paw, bear paw, bear paw, and it just gets louder and more persistent until I buy the bear paws. So I think to answer your question, there's definitely a tension there, and I think that as much as parents can influence their kids in what they buy or not buy, I think it also goes the other way, and you're also influencing purchases that in some cases you wouldn't expect to necessarily be considered as part of the thought process of making that purchase. I remember seeing a stat a few years ago about how there's actually a very high number of young people who influence their parents' choice in purchasing a car. I mean, that is a huge purchase. I mean, next to your house, it's probably the second largest purchase that adults typically make.
Marketers call youth backseat customers because of exactly that.
Yeah. So I think there definitely is. There's definitely a tension there at play, and that there are a number of different parties that are influencing purchases in households. But kids definitely are a strong voice there.
Thank you for that. Ed, Dad, also, how would you respond?
Yeah, just to build on what Daphne said, and I don't want to wade into this too deeply because it would take another day to go there. There's a huge issue, as you all know, with childhood obesity. Okay, and I'll let that and snack foods and marketing of snack foods and what have you to anyone, but particularly to children and to teens to a lesser extent. The brand companies are and the producers of these snack foods are under constant attack by some special interest groups who will say that you're the problem because you market this stuff. And in conversations and discussions that we've had, and a bit closer to home with the Ontario government, we've said that's fine, but there's a shared responsibility in the home where the parent, we know that, and I hate to say this, but it'll give away my age, but I mean, you don't see kids and people outside as much as they used to. They're attached to whatever, their tablet or their mobile device, and the parents are pushing them to get out there. But of course, the blame game comes back at the marketers. Well, you're pushing this product. So it actually relates a little bit to what you're saying as well in your own home. There is a shared responsibility, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
Andrew from BC, thank you. Who do we have here now?
My name is Sakif, and I'm from St. John's, Newfoundland. And as you were saying about Miley Cyrus, and obviously she did cause quite a backlash and lots of criticism. But I wanted to know, what is your take on the statement that any publicity is good publicity, or that there is no such thing as bad publicity?
Let's throw that one over to Sherry.
I think that statement is very accurate when it comes to promoting popular culture. It's not so good with politicians, but it's very effective in pop culture, and it explains why Miley Cyrus does what she did, why Madonna was as effective a marketer of her music as she was. So absolutely, I think that's an effective statement.
Thank you.
I'm going to go over to the Yukon. I understand we've got a question here.
Hi, yeah. I was just wondering how branding is portrayed differently on men and women. So, like, lots of the times a logo or maybe a slogan is shown, such as like Nike's check mark, like the swoosh and things like that. And I'm wondering if it differs between men and women, how it's like placed on a product, and also like the size of it or something like that.
Okay, Susan, were you able to understand that question? I had a hard time, but go ahead, please.
I think the basic, I lost a few things, but the basic question is, how does marketing differ between men and women, and its impact between men and women?
He was actually asking specifically about where logos were placed on, I think, clothing for men and women. Was there a difference with the Nike swoosh where it's placed on clothing?
That's a great question. I'm not sure I know. To be honest, I have to admit I don't know. Sherry, any thoughts?
I don't know the question either. I mean, I don't know the answer either. My cynical guess might be that because there is this tendency of marketers to emphasize our sexual body parts in order to sensationalize and attract our prurient attention, that it may be that on women's clothing the swoosh is in a strategic place, but I don't know. I'm just guessing.
So I just wanted to double check with our friends in the Yukon. Did we interpret that question correctly, or was there another component to it?
Yeah, I mean, you could also talk about just how marketing is different between men and women. But yeah, that did answer my basic question.
So we'll have to all pay attention now and see whether the observation is an accurate one.
Thank you. Let's go back to the floor here. Tell us your name, please, and where you're from.
My name is Brenna, and I'm from Paisley, Ontario. I just wanted to make a comment that I feel like, we always talk about how marketing makes you feel insecure, and so you buy stuff. But I feel like there's an aspect of that that's kind of gets ignored a little bit, where it's, but what happens when, for whatever reason, because, we're not rich, we can't afford to buy the product that's getting pushed on us. And just because we can't afford to buy it doesn't mean the message suddenly disappears. It stays there. And so I feel like there might be some kind of long-term psychological impact that just doesn't get talked about when all these messages come in, and when you can't afford to buy the product, you don't get, when you buy the product, there's kind of an alleviation there where it's like, oh, okay, now I feel good about myself for like a week because I bought the product. And that doesn't happen when you can't afford to buy it. So those messages would kind of start to accumulate about how we're not good enough and we just can't do anything about it because we can't afford it.
Is there any product in particular that comes to mind when you're talking about this?
I think probably the most prominent one would be beauty products and cosmetics, because I know, and I think most girls would agree, they are really, really expensive. And you just can't afford to buy everything that people are telling you that you need. It's impossible.
I think you're beautiful even without all those expensive beauty products. Sherry?
Well, I think what you're talking about is, we could call it the lifestyles of the rich and famous effect. And when we are surrounded by, in the media, these images of really luxury goods, whether they're cars or cosmetics or perfumes, and they're literally out of our financial reach, there is the aggregate cumulative impact over time that there's an us and them scenario in the world, and there are people who can afford to buy all these things, and then there are those of us who can't. And so it's subtle and insidious, and I think it contributes to the sort of divide between haves and have-nots. So yeah, I understand that concern, and it is one of the impacts of aspirational advertising, and advertisers will often say, what we're presenting is something for people to aspire to. But the other flip side of aspiring to own stuff all the time is the notion that we're going to experience happiness and success merely through the purchase of products, as opposed to through the actions that we take. And so you get this, as you mentioned, a momentary lift of buying the thing, but a week later, it actually hasn't made you any happier or smarter or bought you any friends. And so there is also this tension around, you know, can we achieve the things that are most important to us in life, which are experiencing friendship and loving and being loved and having meaning in our lives. Advertising doesn't sell us stuff that will give us those things. And so that's also a challenge.
Thank you so much for sharing that. We've got a lot of questions, so let's move on.
Hi, I already spoke, but I just have a question. Because you know, like how we were discussing the, can you hear me? Or, okay, you know how like we were discussing how buying, when you like get a certain product, suddenly like you feel good about yourself, and like they're always trying to push products on you so that you feel better about yourself and things like that. Do we even know like what is attractive or good these days anymore, or what qualifies as beautiful or what qualifies as good anymore, or what would you think?
So, Susan, I think as I understand your question, what's the standard of beauty, right?
Yeah, exactly.
What's the standard of beauty from the trends that you're seeing?
I feel like personally we've really lost sight of that because we've been all these products have been like pushed on us, so we don't really know what is beauty. I don't know. So what qualifies as that as beauty? Yeah.
I think that's a great point. I think you've already made the point. You know, I don't know that I have too much to add. I would say that this is part of what's driving, just to give you a sense of what's happening in the industry, there is a push on right now both to have more women in leadership roles in advertising, because there are actually a stunningly low percentage of creative directors at advertising agencies are women. And there's also a push, equally, if not more important, for greater diversity at advertising agencies. So the people who bring you a lot of those messages tend not to be as diverse as I think we would necessarily like.
Or as diverse as the people in this room.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the more diversity leads to, so more women in decision-making roles, I think, can lead to a change. I also think that there's that stunning lack of diversity is a big problem. We talk about body types and standards of beauty, but how do we expect to have any realistic sense of a standard of beauty if every single face we see in every single cosmetics ad is white and thin, with maybe a token person of color thrown in occasionally for good measure, but not any real difference? I think that's an excellent point, and I think that that's something, as consumers, you have the power to push for. Tell those companies, I'm sick of seeing 105-pound white girls in your ads. Like, give me some change, you know, and you can push for that.
Susan, I can totally relate to that because I grew up being bombarded by images of Barbie. I grew up looking at myself in the mirror and praying that I'd wake up with blonde hair, blue eyes, and freckles. So I can completely relate. Took some time to realize I don't need that stuff. I don't need the Barbie image. I'm happy. Thank you for that. So, Whitehorse, you've got a question for us? Tell us your name first and give us your question or your comment.
I'm Jesse. I was just wondering what your opinion was on internet piracy, torrenting, and that sort of thing, as it is becoming a growing, and it's huge now actually, especially in youth, a growing media for downloads. Pretty much any software, music, movie, TV show can be downloaded illegally for free. How do you think that's affecting media, advertising? Is it affecting it negatively enough to be an issue, or is it small enough that companies don't really take it into account?
Daphne, I'll throw that question over to you.
Sure, it's a really good question. I think the entertainment industry is really threatened and really scared about what they're seeing people do online, whether it's illegally torrenting content or even watching things online over services like Netflix. These industries really need to well, they're waking up and realizing that the world has changed and they need to do something differently. And I think as a result, they are becoming more aggressive in how they are advertising to their customers. They need to be. I think they need to better understand their customers, and so that's why in many cases they are resorting to tracking their customers so that they can better understand what their customers like and don't like, what they want now, what they may perhaps want in the future. At least in our organization, that's something that we look at very closely because we recognize that there are privacy concerns there.
Thank you for that. Any other questions or comments from Whitehorse?
Hi, I'm Kyle from Whitehorse. How can we become more aware of what's happening kind of behind the scenes when we buy a product? Like when you buy an iPod, you hear stories about how the Foxconn factories in China, people are killing themselves in Nike sweatshops. So how can we be more aware of how our products are being made? And
So you're asking about ethical practices then?
yes.
It sounds like. Ed, do you have any contribution to this? Thank you for that, Kyle.
Sherry's probably better to talk about that. But, you know, it probably relates as much to the information that's on the internet that you can certainly find out about the practices, and if, for example, clothing is made wherever in Bangladesh or what have you. It's the larger brands will be very transparent because they want to be ahead of you before you actually ask the question and discover it for yourself and then tweet it out or whatever you might do. I don't know, Sherry, you might.
Well, I would concur. I would just say that the huge gift of the internet is that there really are no secrets anymore. And so as long as one person with a cell phone or a computer link knows something that's going on around the ethics of a company, the world will know. And so surfing the internet, Googling ethical practices and the name of the company that you're potentially considering buying something for will probably eventually turn up something if there's a smoking gun there about practices that you wouldn't support and don't want to support with your dollars.
And you know what I find really fascinating is that consumers today can actually have that conversation. Was this ethically made? Before the internet, before technology, there was no question. It's a $5 shirt, it's a great deal, I'll buy it. But now we've got consumers like Kyle in the Yukon who are posing those questions thanks to technology because they're more discerning consumers. So thank you for raising that point, Kyle. Go ahead, please. Your name and where you're from.
I'm Abram from Woodstock, New Brunswick, and I guess I'd like to continue this conversation about ethical products. And I guess the question, is market apathy, because there's people like me and I guess my new buddy from Whitehorse. I love you because you. I thought I was alone in this world. How can you convince people who know about these things but don't really care to invest in ethical products? How can we make that more commonplace? Because there's big brands like Nike, and everybody buys Nike, but Nike builds tons of products in Bangladesh with terrible working conditions and terribly underpaid people and child labor.
So, Susan, I'm sure you have some perspective on that.
I have a number of thoughts on this. I actually disagree that the bigger companies will be transparent. I think history has shown that the bigger companies will not be transparent unless they're forced to be transparent. So, you know, the point that you made, a friend in the Yukon, about Apple and the working conditions in China with Foxconn, their contractor in China, that didn't come out because of the internet. That came out because of massive investigative work by the New York Times over a number of months. And it wasn't out before, and it came out because of the work, and I'm obviously biased here, but it came out because of the work of journalists. Similar with Loblaw and Joe Fresh. Did you know the working conditions of the people in the factory in Bangladesh before the Rana Plaza collapse? No, you didn't. And it came out because that incident happened, and then reporters worked to bring you that story. And so I am obviously a biased person here, but I would suggest that it's not enough to surf the web. It's not enough to look at Twitter. And I know this is going to make me sound preachy, but it's important to turn to some of the real journalistic outlets who are doing that hard, on-the-ground, investigative reporting to keep yourselves informed. It doesn't have to be my newspaper. There are lots of other papers, lots of other television outlets out there doing this hard, really good work. But I think what's important to remember is that you do have to do the, like TLDR, it's not always okay. You know, sometimes it's too long and you should read it.
Sorry, I'm really ignorant.
TLDR means too long, didn't read. I'm sure you've all seen it on Facebook. Someone posts something,
I'm
it's
so
like,
old school.
TLDR. That's not always a good idea to just default to that's too long, I didn't read it. It's important to turn to vetted sources who are doing really hard work to bring you that information as consumers so that you have the firepower to say, I'm not going to buy these products. Or, as a lot of experts in the news have advised, in the case of Joe Fresh in Bangladesh, for example, don't boycott Bangladesh. Instead, demand of those companies that they better working conditions in Bangladesh. Put the pressure on them not to deglobalize, because it's not helping people in Bangladesh to take industries out of there, but put the pressure on Loblaw Co-Limited, put the pressure on Nike, put the pressure on these huge retailers that you spend lots of money with, and say, invest in those countries. That's great. Make sure the working conditions are safe, make sure workers are paid a fair wage, and make sure we're not treating our global neighbors as second-class citizens.
Thank you for that. So it's a really terrific arguments for the work of good, solid journalism, and I think that all of you are here because of an interest in that. Perhaps we'll take it offline because I'm told that we've got about 4 more minutes left in this discussion, so we'll motor on. Go ahead, please.
Okay, my name is Samuel, and I have a question that's kind of about the definition of beauty, because if we have a definition of beauty, then shouldn't there be a definition of ugly? And if there is a definition of ugly, you want to pressure the people who are ugly to become beautiful. But if they cannot do that, then what other options do they have? Do they have to like go through surgery to become beautiful? Or should they just take their life because they have no chance at becoming the definition of beauty?
Well, you know what? I can relate to that because when I was your age, I thought I was empirically ugly. I didn't fit the mold. I wasn't blonde. I wasn't blue-eyed with the freckles. It was tough. I had a really tough time turning on the TV, watching all the TV commercials, going through the fashion magazines and the those teen rock band magazines. I forget what they were called, Tiger Beat. Anyway, I'm dating myself. Sherry, did you want to add anything?
Well, I was just going to say, first of all, I'm blonde, blue-eyed, and have freckles, and I certainly didn't feel like I fit either. But I think the whole notion that there's a definition of beauty is crap. I mean, there is no definition of beauty. Around the world, I wrote a second book called In Your Face, which is about the culture of beauty and you for teens, and the definitions of beauty in Mexico and Nairobi are completely different, or they used to be before global marketing, from the definitions here. And the truth is that beauty is a very subjective thing. What I find attractive might be completely different from what you find attractive, and the problem with the beauty industry is that it is promoting this one single definition. And speaking about Unilever and Dove, Unilever also produces a product that is a skin lightening product that is sold to women in India and China and Africa, which is encouraging them to hate the color of their skin, which is also antithetical to Dove's message. So thank you for raising that question.
Thank you.
And also there's like, if you look at the advertisements, it's either do this or don't do this. If you can agree with the don't do this, and you know that, or don't do this, or don't be this, if you agree, if you have something similar to them, and you aren't like similar to the people who say do this, then that also does it. Because the only two types of advertising is like do something or don't do something. So.
Okay. Thank you so much for that comment. I have to wrap this up because of the time constraints. I'm so sorry, but I just wanted to add one thing. Since we're talking about beauty and image, I find it so beautiful to be in a room full of youthful, fresh perspectives and discerning minds. This was really, truly a privilege for me, and I'm sure for our panelists, to be among such beautiful thinkers, beautiful minds. Thank you. Thank you for listening. So I have to wrap it up. I'm so sorry. We've got about a dozen people at the back waiting for questions, but maybe we'll take it offline if we have the time. But I've got to thank MediaSmarts for assembling this panel of brain power. So once again, Sonia Krasinski. Wow, what a fan club. Yeah, let's start today. And we had Cartwright. Yes. Daphne Galore. And Sherry Gordon. Now, before you leave us, I'd like to call upon Abel Lutz from New Brunswick, Margaret Rochefort from Quebec, to come forward. They have a little souvenir for you, a souvenir of Media Literacy Week. We got some swag for you.
Thank you very much.
Branded swag, yes. Newly branded MediaSmarts. Thank you, thank you. And we have some final words from Anthony Wilson-Smith, President of Historica Canada.
So, good morning, barely, and félicitations à tous. C'était vraiment impressionnant, surtout, en fait, la participation de vous, les étudiants ici. It's, you're quite a crew. I think we heard, it was interesting at the outset today, with our organization, of course, with Linda being involved in encounters, at the beginning to hear how smart you all are, how influential you all are, how awesome you all are, how you rule the world and everybody's terrified. I have to think at a point, a couple of minutes in, I thought, guys, come on, you know this stuff, but come on, you're not that good. And then, and actually, you kind of are. And which, by the way, goes for you too, Yukon. I can't quite see you, but you are. And the reason why you are, is because you have the smarts already to know what you don't know, and to understand that there are things going on out there to motivate you that you don't quite understand everything about, and that to a really remarkable degree you understand that a certain essence of marketing and of that notion of beauty and attractiveness somebody touched on is that there's always going to be somebody who's going to make you feel like the next big thing to make you beautiful, you don't quite have it, but it's just beyond your reach, but you might be able to get it. And I'm really impressed by how well you see that. And of course, part of that is you showed coming into the room today that you had that sense, but you're also guided by a panel starting with the moderator who talked about that difference in conceptions that you yourself experienced growing up. Susan gave you the background of how this stuff works out there. And I think two things I really appreciated are that you spoke to this as a marketer in making the right defense. In the end, this is about you. You decide to buy or not. And that you can't shirk that responsibility. And also speaking as a dad, of which I'm one as well, that parents have to wade into this. And Andrew from BC, I want to say to you, it's not only Asian parents who influence buying habits. So don't let your heads get too big, because I still got the visa in my family. I know my wife does too. And Daphne is your protective source in this, as is Sherry recently in ways too, teaching you about common sense, but also about the rights you have to defend yourself that are built in. But the problem is the next big thing, as soon as people like me discover Facebook, you move off. As soon as Snapchat comes in and I find out about it, it's time to move on. And there'll always be a trend like that. So merci encore. C'était vraiment pour moi aussi une expérience, a very moving and also educational experience, I think, for everybody within. But I also feel a lot more encouraged about the future when I see what hands it's in. So finally, I think we have some media around, and if and that we do, you should know that the students are available for interview, and they're good ones too. Thanks.